Hello and welcome back to another reliability list. This time I'm covering the least reliable cars I've ever had the pleasure or displeasure of experiencing. Now this list isn't made from stats and figures from big car publications. This is just my own experiences from having put together hundreds of car buyer guides. Let's get into it. Now, I'm going to start at the smaller, more affordable cars in the market and work my way to the larger, more premium cars. So no matter what you're looking to buy, there's going to be something to avoid in this list, I promise you that. So kicking us off is Ford with their infamous 1-litre Ecoboost engine, or Ecoboom as it became known, due to its tendency for going wrong. Now you're going to find these engines in Fiestas, Focuses, C-Maxes, as well as a few other cars in the range, and they are truly terrible. See, the problem was the original design of this engine used a wet timing belt. Without getting too technical, it means the timing belt is fed through the engine oil, and like a soggy old tea bag, it starts to break apart, gets caught in some of the oil pickups, starves the engine of oil, and kills the engine. Now around 2018-2019, Ford realised the error of their ways and they switched to a completely different design of engine, still called a 1-litre Ecoboost, but it has proven to be a good bit better than the older engines. Here's a really useful little tip I can give you to differentiate between an old 1-litre Ecoboost and a new 1-litre Ecoboost. It's the positioning of the turbo. So on an old engine, it has the turbo right at the front like this. On a newer engine, the turbo is tucked away at the back. If you're looking to buy a 2018 onwards 1-litre Ecoboost, don't just assume it's got the new engine, check. Next up in the small car category is the Peugeot 208, and this one tops the list for the sheer number of recalls issued. And not for trivial stuff either. These have an issue wherein when the front anti-roll bar bushings wear out, it can actually stop the brakes from working if the recall hasn't been performed on it. Add to that there's recalls for the steering column, the ECU, the engine, even some of the body panels means they are just not worth the hassle. If you need a small economical car like this, honestly, my money would go towards something like a Toyota Yaris. Next up, bit of a surprise here. It's a premium brand, Audi A3. Now I want to be very clear, it's only very specific versions of the A3 that tend to give problems, namely those with DSG gearboxes with dry clutch packs fitted. Now these dry clutch packs were notorious for giving loads of problems and costing an absolute fortune to fix. The problem you've got as a prospective buyer is, well, it's hard to know if it's got one of those dry clutch packs fitted. So what you can do is drop a comment below this video with the engine size and year of the car that you're looking to buy, registration plate as well if you're comfortable giving that over, and I can come back and tell you if it has one of these problematic gearboxes fitted to it. Generally speaking though, if it's a 7-speed, if it's a DSG gearbox and it's not an S or RS performance model, it's probably got one of those dry clutch gearboxes fitted. Be careful. Now that same gearbox found its way into a few other VW products as you might expect, and that leads us on to the next car in this list, the Seat Ibiza, specifically the Ibiza Cupra made between 2009 and 2017. As I mentioned, it's got that same horrid problem-ridden gearbox, but to really add insult to injury on these cars, they got a terrible engine as well, the 1.4 TSI twin-charged. Technically very, very ambitious. It had both a supercharger and a turbocharger, but they were just awful. Time and chain problems, turbo problems, supercharger problems. The list goes on and on. Really, if you're looking at one of these cars, just don't. Consider something like a Fiesta ST, a Civic Type R, something like that will give you infinitely less issues. Now this next one, probably a bit of a surprise, but before we get to it, let me share a quick tip with you. No matter what used car you're buying, use this service that I found, vehiclescore.co.uk. Enter the plate of the car that you're looking to buy and it will tell you the good and bad points about that car for completely free. Now these guys also offer paid HPI reports as well. I cannot stress this enough. Make sure you do one of those. I'm going to add a 15% discount voucher on screen now, so you have absolutely no excuse. Use that and make sure you buy a good car. So next on the list is the Ford Cougar. I know, a well-loved car, we see them all the time on the roads, but geez, if you want to avoid a big bill, avoid the automatic Cougars before 2016. I cannot say that any more plainly for you. Avoid the automatics before the facelift in 2016. Let me tell you why. So prior to 2016, Ford fitted these cars with their power shift gearbox. Now this automatic gearbox used plastic retainers inside it. I know, doesn't take a genius to know that that plastic's probably going to go brittle and start to break, which is exactly what it does. It's then chewed up by the gearbox, it gets everywhere on the inside until it eventually fails. That then needs to be ripped out, completely refurbished and replaced. It's going to give you a hefty, hefty bill, and if you want to avoid it, do not buy an automatic power shift Mark II Cougar before the facelift in 2016. You've been warned. So next up, we're getting into the really premium stuff. Quite honestly, the stuff that costs enough money that we shouldn't see these types of problems, but we do every single day. Right at the top of that list, the Mark II Range Rover Evoke. Now these have still got a downright dangerous problem wherein when you come to a stop, sometimes they will unselect the gear that they were in and refuse to select a new gear until the car is completely turned off and back on again. We actually had one owner reach out to us and say they had a truck approaching from the rear. The truck was expecting them to set off from a set of traffic lights, but obviously they couldn't select the gear and the truck almost hit them. Just unacceptable. Land Rover do seem to be issuing updates to try and rectify this, but so far seems like there are still problematic cars out there. Added to that, these are mild hybrids and they have an issue wherein when they hit 15 mile an hour, it'll switch back to the engine power and refuse to use the electricity. Many owners have bought these to try and cut down on fuel costs, but they can't force the car to use the electricity, so they end up burning fuel anyway. Again, Land Rover seem to be scratching their head as to why that's happening. DPF problems, turbo problems, just not good enough for a car that costs this much money. Very, very nice cars, very nice materials used in the interior, nice quality, but at that level of unreliability, it can't justify the cost. And finally, number 7 on the list, it's actually going to be more than 7 cars because this takes into account a few of the range. We've got the Velar, the Sport and the Discovery Land Rovers. Now these all share the old 2-litre diesel Ingenium engines, which are just known to be terrible. The Mark II Evoke escaped this. It uses the better design of the 2-litre Ingenium diesel engine, but the older ones, the Mark I, you could also count them in this category. They've got some pretty severe timing chain problems, so the chains are too thin for a start, so they'll tend to stretch, and they also used plastic guides for the chain as well. Could these guys not learn their lesson from Ford? I'm going to put a list of all the affected cars with these old 2-litre Ingenium engines on screen now. It also takes into account some of the Jaguars that use it, and honestly, again, I wouldn't go near any of these cars with a barge pole. Now thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and for more videos like it, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.